Yo, what it do, everybody? Your favorite anti-hero, back with another video. For those who don't know me, I am the Pepperoni, and here, I don't typically like to throw shade, but I do enjoy sprinkling pepper. Because I care. Okay, so this is going to be the follow-up of my book review for The Dead Undone by author Ellie Douglas. This is going to be the book roast for this book, and it's a lot, so I'm just going to jump in. Let's just go ahead and talk about the cover real quick. As you can see, you've got the biohazard symbol on the front. That's not original, but it is, I guess it catches my eye. And at least the back, it's a different design. I've seen books where it's the same on the front and the back, so I guess, that's kind of good. This video will have lots of spoilers. Okay, let's just start kind of early on in the beginning. You're in for a fun adventure when the very first line of dialogue is, "Oh, fuck me!" Also, let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. You figure out in chapter 1 that the monsters in this book are basically zombies that are coming out of a swamp. They're translucent. You can see through them, and you are then repeatedly told for the entire book, practically every single fucking time they appear, that you can see through them. In one way, shape, or form, the author makes sure to remind you that you can see through these monsters. Now, early on, there's an issue on page 8. There is a fight that occurs with two of the inmates. One character's name is Travis. The other character's name is Tommy. That's kind of confusing. But they get into a fight, and it results in one of them, Tommy, getting multiple fingers broken. He gets 3 fingers broken on one hand, 2 fingers broken on the other. After the fight, one of the nurses, Nurse Shane, picks him up, takes him to the infirmary to be helped out by a doctor. Shane then leaves the infirmary when the doctor shows up and goes to talk with the one who harmed him. He talks for about 2 minutes. There's like 2 back and forths, if that. Then the main character appears, named Willa. Willa speaks with him as they leave the room and they go back to the infirmary. Another maybe 2 minutes go by. This means when they arrive back in the infirmary to check on the guy who has 5 broken fingers, 3 on one hand, 2 broken fingers on the other. It's been about 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes. When they arrive, both of his fucking arms are in casts. That makes no sense. Why did they put his whole damn arms in casts? Number 1. Number 2, how did they know to do that? They have to x-ray these things before they start trying to figure out how to go forth. In addition, casts take like 30 minutes just to harden. So, what? On page 22, you'll find this beautiful sentence. Orbiting inside of his stomach, the acid flings into the back of his throat and then propels out of his mouth. He vomits. I think that's what you're looking for. He vomits. 2 words. That's all you need. Next page. The opposite side of that piece of paper. He turns and falls to his knees, and his face elongates away from his body as his mouth opens wide, letting out the raging torrent of bile. He vomits. Also on that same page, there's this line. It reads, everywhere he looks is a graveyard of bloody massacre. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, so I just scribbled it out. Also, this book has some priceless similes. For example, here's two of them back to back on page 25. Seconds later, he is at the bottom, trying desperately to avoid the many arms and clanging teeth that reach for him like a parade of school kids after a lolly scramble. We're talking about zombies trying to eat him, and it's compared to kids at a lollipop scramble. The very next two sentences. Joseph screams as one of the things grabs him, pulling him further downward. It bites into his neck like a 2,000-year-old starving vampire, pulling his skin up, then ripping it from his body. Yeah, that's in here. Then you have this interesting bit on page 28. It says, once inside, they are greeted with a large half-circle floor, spanning as wide as 150 feet. In the center stands a solid oak desk, where 44-year-old Marion takes the day shift, and 32-year-old Lisa has the night. Now you might be wondering, is it important for us to know who runs the day shift or the night shift? No, it's not important. We don't need to know that. In addition, you might also be wondering, why does it say that Marion is 44 years old and Lisa is 32 years old? Is that important? No. There's also this that really bothers the shit out of me. Because look, it says on the back, if you thought sleeping was safe, think again. It says it right there. That's what that is. And I've never heard a truer statement, because this shit keeps me up at night. Look at this. Look at that. Okay? You see those circles? You see that? In this one paragraph, the author can't figure out if she wants to use numbers, like numerical numbers, or the written word numbers. So, numerical number, word number. The entire asylum has 108 patients, 24 nurses, and one head matron, Vera, and 10 orderlies. 5 doctors live in a separate hotel alongside the nurses' hostel. The orderlies share the nurses' hostel. Communal sharing isn't something any of the nurses want, but each of them manages. And it works with all 18 female nurses and 6 male nurses. The 10 orderlies are all men. I don't care if you use numerical numbers or words. Just pick one. Look at this. You see that? Look at that. If I can get it in focus. Right on top of each other. She can't figure out if she wants to use the full word doctor or the abbreviation DR for doctor. Even worse is this character. Let me explain. There's a character in this story. Okay, it's a man. There's a man in this story. Sometimes this man is called Phillips. He's just called Phillips. Other times, he's called Dr. Phillips. And it's spelled DOCTOR. Other times it's just the abbreviation, DR Phillips. However, sometimes it's written with the full word, doctor, but instead of Phillips, plural, it's written Philip Baxter. So his last name is actually Baxter. His last name isn't Phillips or Philip. It's Baxter. His name is Philip Baxter. And sometimes it's written abbreviated DR, Philip Baxter. When this character appears in this story, you're going to get one of 5 names for him, written in different ways. It says on page 96, this is dialogue, quote, they're talking about something they've seen. What was it? Well, let's figure it out. The dialogue reads, too big for a sheep, too small for a dog. Maybe it was a cow. What? Too big for a sheep, too small for a dog. Maybe it was a cow. Are you an alien? Are you not from this planet? Do you not know the dimensions of these animals? There's also this problem in chapters Tui Island's Cops, chapter Tui Asylum, Things Go Bump in the Night, chapter The Journey to the Asylum, and chapter Lance and Jim. These 4 right here, these 4 chapters are centered left. They're not in the middle. Oh, that's not a good example, huh? You see this? How does that happen? How do 4 chapters in the middle of your book get hard pan to the left? How does that get through an editor's filter? Oh, and by the way, while I'm here, look, man, on page 159, there's some characters sitting around eating and drinking, and it says, he sits there watching Sally dunk her biscuits into her tea and then pop most of it into her mouth. Look, man, I'm an American. I'm from the South. We love our sweet tea, and we love a good Southern biscuit. But you don't dip a biscuit in tea, man. You should be in the insane asylum. Why are you not in the insane asylum? Jokes. But that's what I did think when I first read it. I was like, what the fuck am I reading? Just imagine little pieces of biscuit floating around in your sweet tea. It's fucking gross. And I love this line. On page 167, it says, it reads, Vera grits her teeth, and her hands knot fistfuls of the sheet below her. The pain throbs intensely. It is deep and hot. Yeah, I know where this is going. Let's keep going. To Vera, it feels like razor blades slicing at her legs repeatedly. Maybe I don't know where this is going. This book has a problem with head hopping in the middle of chapters, sometimes in the middle of the same paragraph. For instance, on page 171, it's talking about how Paul is feeling and wondering. But then 2 pages later, on page 173, another character named Dr. Lime is questioning things in his mind, and we're seeing his thoughts. Which, by the way, let me give some props to author Ellie Douglas. Ellie Douglas, you can write some really good gory stuff, straight up. He doesn't technically, I think, die in this scene, but I mean, it's basically the last time we really see Dr. Lime, so I consider it his death scene. When Dr. Lime is attacked and basically killed, that is, in my opinion, the best scene in this book. That scene is just awesome in the worst way. I love it. It's so gory, so violent, and it is personal. You get to kind of experience how he's like what his experience is being ripped apart by this fucking monster that's like a walking wood chipper. So good stuff. But as you go on, it turns into just chaos. There's just way too much gore towards later in the book. It turns into like the Transformers or something. Like Transformers 2 when you just got explosions and CGI monsters running around. You don't know what the hell you're watching. It's kind of like that. It gets a little out of control. Oh, I love this too. On page 173, Dr. Lime gets basically killed by this zombie. And then he's like mad. It says he's mad because no one's showing up to save him. But then the first person who comes on the scene is Wiremew. And that's like after it's all said and done, like Dr. Lime's basically dead. And then a few pages later on 177, there's this dialogue that reads, I am sure he will. Wiremew will bring him back here pretty quickly. If there is one thing about Wiremew, he doesn't muck around at all. You can count on him. I don't know if that's meant to be a joke, but that's fucking gold. I actually wrote in the book, I think Dr. Lime would disagree. Also, I think the name of this book shouldn't have been The Dead Undone. I think the name of this book should have just been Stay Dead. Because you see, in this book, there's this wonderful joke, this just beautiful play on words, where instead of saying stay down, the character says stay dead. Top drawer. Top drawer. Well, if you think it was, really good and you enjoyed that joke, when Jim, the character Jim, says stay dead, then you're really going to love it when it's later said again on page 258 by the main character Willa, when she says stay dead. So, yeah, two different characters came up with the same one-liner. Beautiful. Also, there's a dog named Draco, and there's this scene on page 186 where it says, Jim goes with Sally into the kitchen, and moments later they return with a tray of Sally's chocolate chip cookies and hot cups of tea. Lance is happy for the hot drink. His body suddenly feels chilled to the bone. Draco is spoiled and given a couple of cookies. I'd like to do a public service announcement. Don't give dogs chocolate. It makes them sick. Also, in this book that has these translucent zombies and ghosts, there's also mummies. On page 189, one of the characters says, Mummy, what is it? And, no, I want daddy. Mummy, I want daddy. Yeah, I was just as surprised about that as you are. On page 226, the sentence reads, with the severe cold snap bathing him in numbing, freezing cold air, he... Pause. Time out right there. It's either numbing cold air or freezing cold air. Just pick one. You don't have to put them both. Now, in this book, the main character, Willa, there's a scene where she finds herself fighting alongside of a fellow nurse. And they're fighting the monsters together. Now, the nurse, he's got his handy-dandy fire extinguisher, and he's just bashing the zombies with the fire extinguisher. But Willa, luckily for her, Willa is a kung fu master. She's throwing ninja kicks, fucking roundhouses. She's just laying them out. She's knocking them out with hard hooks like a professional boxer. She literally needs no weapon. She is just whipping ass with her bare hands. What? I'm not saying that she can't be a kung fu master, but it just seems fucking random as hell. It doesn't explain it. And what it does try to explain is the character, the nurse, Shane, he's like, geez, where'd you learn to punch like that? And it actually says in the book that she's like, oh, I learned from Muhammad Ali. And he's like, what? Muhammad Ali trained you? Holy shit, really? And she's like, no, silly. I just watched it on TV. Bruh. So she just watched a couple of Muhammad Ali fights and was like, okay, yeah, I could do that. And now she's like a pro. She is fucking laying them out. She's got punches that are like the equivalent of getting hit with a baseball bat just because she watched Muhammad Ali. I need to start watching some of his old footage because, that would really help me out in my street fighting, life. Also, but that doesn't explain the roundhouse kicks. Maybe she's been watching some Bruce Lee and she learned that from him. I don't know. This is page 239. Here's two sentences. She wonders if she'll have time. Period. Next sentence. But decides her best option is not to leave it, is to get behind the thing and punch it from behind. More you know. There's also this wonderful one. At the bottom of 239, going to 240. It reads, Shane pulls the extinguisher backwards like a bowstring and rams the thing in the face, turning its nose into wet paper mache while one eye pops out and dangles like a busted yo-yo against the thing's bloodied face. Period. Editors. Line editors. Story developmental editors. They exist for a reason. There's also this weird thing where the phrase son of a bitch appears in here once with spaces. Son, space, of, space, a, space, bitch. And then for the rest of the story, it just becomes one mixed up, jumbled thing. It's just one run-on word that son of a bitch. Now here's a real problem that I found with the book. If you look on the back of the book, first of all, it says Willa and her team chop, smash, hammer, stab, shoot, and even burn the monsters beyond recognition. But some just don't stay dead. Why? That is incorrect. There is not a situation like that at all in the story. Every monster that Willa and the others, quote, chop, smash, hammer, stab, shoot, and even are burned, either everything they do doesn't kill them because they haven't hit them in the head, or they figure out that they have to hit them in the head, and once they do that, they die. And that's the end of it. They don't come back. As the book says, they're double dead. And that's it. They don't come back. So the phrase, but some just don't stay dead. Why? That's misleading. None of them die a second time and come back. That's just not right. But also, more importantly, on the back, obviously, we know that Willa is the main character. And that's fine. But it specifically says, Willa watches as her world unceremoniously perishes before her very eyes. Determined that she will not let her world die, she leads a team into a dark and dangerous battle. It says that she's leading the team. It then doubles down and says it again. Willa and her team. And then the last little blip, it says follow Willa and her team. So it just keeps saying it over and over again. Her team. She's leading the team. That is wrong. She's not leading the team. If you look on page 282, you get this section here. And it literally, I'm just going to read it. You'll see the problem very clearly. We have to plan this. We know they are locked on the ward. I say we make a few solid weapons and just pick them off at the door. Shane suggests. Okay, he's just suggesting. But then, hate to break it to you, Shane, but the four of us can't all hover in the doorframe of the stairwell. Lance counters. Okay, so they're just debating. You are right, Lance. I'll go first, and the rest of you follow. So that's Shane. So at that point, Shane is giving orders. Shane is declaring what the group's going to do. He then says, Willa, our main character who is supposed to be the leader, Shane says, Willa, you go last. And if we are taken down, then get yourself back here and just slam that door. Shane orders. Shane orders Willa. It says, Willa doesn't like this idea, but she won't argue with him. She is going to join them no matter what. So here we have Shane giving Willa orders, and the narration specifically says that Willa doesn't like the idea, but she submits to him. She will not argue. Then it says, everyone, get your weapons ready. Lance clarifies. So we really have a power struggle between Lance and Shane of who's the leader. Willa is not even in the power struggle. She's just there. It says, the four of them are ready in less than 15 minutes. Lance puts Angela, Sally, David, Draco, and Bandit in one of the rooms and has them close the door. He orders them to not come out until he returns and gives the okay. They all agree. So there's Lance giving orders. So Shane is giving the orders, and Lance is giving the orders. And Willa, well, she's just following orders. It then says again, dialogue. All right, boys and girls, it's time. Lance says as he leads the small group to the stairwell doors. See the problem? You know, if your main character isn't the leader, that's not a bad thing. You know, your character can be a follower. But on the back it shouldn't say that they're the leader. It should have said something like, Willa may have not been a natural born leader, but she was certainly not going to sit back while her friends all were being killed by the zombies. She did her part. But was it enough? Find out inside the dead undone. You know, something like that. There's also this annoying thing where Willa, the kung fu master, and her little nurse buddy, Shane has a fire extinguisher. Willa has her fists and kicks, and they are doing a better job at fighting off these monsters than two trained police officers, one of which has a gun. And while Willa and Shane are fighting these monsters, trying desperately to stay alive, and after these monsters have just massacred all the people they know, they're like flirting, like literally just kind of cutesy flirting back and forth while they're fighting. They're just, you know, hey, how you doing? Oh, you look kind of cute as you fight. I mean, that's not the dialogue, but that's the context. And it's like, what? People are dead. What are you doing? And on page 312 is by far the most what the fuck line or section in this book. On page 312, you get this piece of dialogue from the main character, Willa. It is incredibly out of character. It makes no fucking sense to the story. what happens is a monster knocks her over and falls on top of her. And how does she respond? Well, she says, quote, "Get the fuck off me, you man whore. I don't want to sleep with you, and I don't want rabies. Get the fuck off me." What the hell does that have to do with the price of tea in China? We know it's not rabies. Obviously, this monster isn't a man whore or trying to sleep with her. What the, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Like, it's... Doesn't matter how good of a writer you are. We all make mistakes. It's not... I'm not saying that this author, Ellie Douglas, is a bad author. I'm just saying we all make mistakes. It's good to get an editor. And then you have this scene on page 346 where the doctor has like a narcissistic meltdown. But he goes on this long tangent about how he's going to be famous and how he's a genius and he's going to get all these awards and money and there's going to be books and a movie made about him. Like, this guy has lost his fucking mind. How is it the people who work with him didn't see this coming? Guy is this much of a stereotypical villain. There should have been warning signs. Like, in the story, he kills people. He allows these monsters to rip his so-called friends apart. And Willa and them are just like, man, I really disagree with what he did, causing all those people to be massacred, just absolutely obliterated by these monsters. But oh well, shit happens. And he's like, see? I told you. Y'all should have listened. And they're like, damn. He makes a really convincing point. It is our fault. There's also some issues in here with tone. I struggle sometimes to understand what the tone of this book is. Like, for instance, on page 79, you've got this scene, right, where it introduces this little kid, this little 4-year-old kid. And all around here has been nothing but gore and violence and monsters and people getting ripped apart. And then you have this scene where you get to look into the mind of this little 4-year-old kid and you see, it says candy visions pop into his mind. Dancing candy bars and stripy colored candy sticks cause him to smile bigger and bigger. Like, I just went from, like reading, or it was like the movie The Thing, as people are just getting ripped apart in this horribly graphic, gory way. And then just, in a flash, it's like I'm watching the intro of fucking the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie, and it's like dance and food. It's a groovy time for a movie time. It's like, what the, am I on acid? What's happening? Look at this sentence. Her strides are long and hard, comma. She casts a cold, steely look at Willa, comma, while she abruptly and purposefully brushes past one of Willa's patients, comma, almost knocking him to the ground as she makes her way through the room, comma, into the other room, comma, down into the corridors and then vanishes again, period. In this book, obviously there is a haunted asylum, and I feel like it was a very missed opportunity because the location could not have been any better for your story, Ellie Douglas. You're on an isolated, secluded island in a haunted asylum. I mean, that is so cool. Like, that is... There should have been such a creepy atmosphere to this story. Specifically, I think, surrounding the... like, not surrounding, but, like, inside the insane asylum. And it's just not there. It barely is. It mentions, like a room is cold, but like that's it. And I think you could have done some really cool stuff with it. Speaking of which, Let's look at that section. On page 13 to page 14, it reads, "It feels colder in that room, period. Something Shane has always noted, period. Several degrees colder, and it has a funny smell, period. Not chemical or cleaning, but more of a sugary sweet smell, period. One he never can place, period." On page 46 it says, "Beatrice squeezes tears out of her eyes." Where else do you squeeze tears? On page 52, you have three sentences that should all be reconstructed. It says, "Starting with Jerry Finley, who was transferred to Tui on grounds of insanity after killing his wife and 2 children, then he tried to kill himself more than once, period. 5 times, period. He jumped from the Harbor Bridge and survived, period. Negative." Let me tell you how that sentence should have been. Jerry Finley was transferred to Tui on grounds of insanity, period. Next sentence. After killing his wife and 2 children, comma, he then tried to kill himself 5 times, semicolon. One of which involved him jumping off the Harbor Bridge, period. You don't have to say he survived after jumping off the Harbor Bridge. If he's in the insane asylum, we know he survived. Also, the main character, Willa, has turquoise eyes, and I just wanted to mention it because it's so important that the author mentions it 3 times in this book. I love this. On page 55, it says, in her mind, she knows someone is watching. Where else do you know things? Do you know things in your feet? Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the really big issue in this story. This is very disappointing. Okay, on page 204, we get a reveal. There's this thing called BOD, Bringer of Death. Bringer of Death is a weapon created by the North Koreans. And the Bringer of Death is what has caused all these zombies. Okay? It says on page 205, once the drug was deployed with a gas that was inserted into the prisoners, it spread. It says, everyone who came in contact with the Bringer of Death, in fact, died. Okay, so it's called Bringer of Death, and this doctor flat out says, anyone who comes in contact with it dies. So if you come in contact with it, you're going to die. However, 2 pages later, he retcons himself. So he contradicts himself. 2 pages later, he says, the question I have is, did anyone see any kind of gas in the air? It might be a few days back now. It have been a yellowish color with a weird taste if you were unfortunate enough to get it in your mouth. It kind of burns and leaves an aftertaste. So, did anyone here experience this? So that's what the doctor says. The main character, Willa, says, I experienced that. Does this mean I'm sick too? He then says, no, If you've shown no signs by now, then you will have been one of the ones immune to it. So, does everyone who is exposed to this die? Or are there some people who are immune to it? Which one is it? First you said if you're everyone, it literally says everyone who came in contact with the bringer of death, in fact, died. 2 pages later, no, if you show no signs by now, then you will have been one of the ones immune to it. Okay. Alright. I'll just take your word for it. She's immune to it. Okay, if that's the case, that actually explains something that happens later in the story. You see, as the story goes on, her and all of her friends that are fighting with her, they're killing a lot of these monsters. And as they're killing them, they are being doused, absolutely drenched and doused in the blood and guts of these monsters. Now, if these monsters had a biological weapon that they can infect people with, then being covered in that blood would infect you. On page 257, there's a monster trying to get a hold of the main character, Willa, and it says, he is grabbing at her everywhere, trying to bite her. But luckily for Willa, she is drenched in so much blood from the many she's killed that she is so slippery the thing can't latch onto her. So she is absolutely drenched in the blood of this toxic creature that infects people, that it bites. Obviously, if you get bit by one of these things, you turn into one. Then on page 309, we have another character named Shane. And Shane says, no, we left running. The door is wide open up there. We must finish this now, Shane says, while he pulls away from Willa, giving her a smile and wiping his eyes. We have to. Now, you don't have to understand the context of what he's specifically talking about. What you have to know is that little tag there. It says, he wipes his eyes. His hands are covered in the blood. And so he's covered in this toxic blood, wiping his eyes, trying to get the blood out of his eyes. But he's pushing it in his eyes. You understand? That's how that works. He's pushing it in his eyes. But since he's with them, and he's experienced that yellow gas that the weapon was a part of, and he wasn't infected, he must be one of the immune ones, right? Like all the others. On page 310, it says, the 3 of them are drenched in offal and splattered blood with streaks that run down their clothes that changes their skin color to a pinkish red. So they are so drenched in this blood that their skin is now stained red. It goes further. He says, what's up, Willa? Shane asks before advancing in. And she replies, nothing, just the smell. I mean, it's all over us. I can't wait till we finish this lot off so I can have a long, and I do mean long, shower. So they're just giggling about how they're covered in this toxic blood. But it doesn't matter, right? Because, they're immune to it. That is until Shane gets bit by one of them later and turns into one. So they're drenched in the shit and they won't turn into one, but as soon as he's bit by one, he magically becomes one of these fucking zombies. And then towards the end of the story, Willa, the main character, gets a vaccine. She gets a vaccine. Why does she get a vaccine if she's immune? What does she have to worry about? Now, there's an important piece of information that I've left out. And I left it out for a reason. I'm going to tell you. But this is where it gets even worse. Now, some of you might have already had some red flags get flown when I mentioned earlier that there was a yellowish colored gas. That might have raised some flags for some of you, but for those who didn't, let me just go ahead and spoil it for you. Bringer of Death, that weapon I mentioned earlier, it's not a biological weapon. It's a chemical weapon. That's right. It's a chemical weapon. Let me say it again.
Chemical weapon.
Chemicals are different than diseases. Chemical weapons are different than biological weapons. I know they're both real scary, but they're different. Instead of chemical weapon, think of bleach. Okay? It says, remember, this is a chemical weapon. He asks, did anyone experience this? And Willis says, oh yeah, I experienced it. Does that mean I'm going to turn into a monster? And he says, oh no, don't worry. You're not going to turn into one. You must be immune to it. Again, think of bleach. No one is immune to bleach. No one can put bleach in their eyes and not go blind. No one can be out running and be hot and stop and undo the cap of some bleach and drink some bleach and I feel refreshed. Let's keep running, and then go back to running and the bleach not fucking kill them. You can't take bleach and inject it in someone's arm and they not die and be like, oh, well, that person must be immune. It's a chemical. It destroys things. Bleach, for example, bleach will kill bacteria and will kill viruses. In fact, bleach can kill cancer. They just ain't figured out how to get it in the body to kill the cancer without killing the person too. And so one thing's for sure, if I had bleach in a syringe, for example, and I injected it into my veins, yeah, I'm going to die for sure. But if I bite you, you're not going to contract bleach. And yet the doctor says, he talks about it like it's a disease. He says this spread the disease even further. When the monsters, or when the people died from the chemical weapon and came back as the monsters, it says it altered their DNA. And they were running around biting people, and it was transferring, it says spreading the disease. A chemical weapon isn't a disease. They're two different things. There isn't a vaccine that prevents you from being affected from a chemical weapon. You can't give me a vaccine and then I'll walk into a sarin gas attack and everyone around me's dying and I'm just like walking around like Superman, like, should have taken your vaccines. Like, it's such a bad plot hole. Like, it's really bad. So these people are being exposed to a chemical weapon, which apparently is a disease. And some people are immune to this chemical weapon, but they can still get bit and turn into it or something. And there's a vaccine for it eventually. I don't know. I don't understand it. Literally, all you had to do, author Ellie Douglas, was say that it was a biological weapon. If you'd have just said it was a biological weapon, end of story. Right there, it's good. But you made a very simple but silly mistake. You said chemical weapon. And that ruins everything. That messes it all up. And sadly, this is another example of why you need editors. You need line editors and you need story development editors. People who can map out story arcs, character development. And that leads me to my last point I need to make about this book. because there's one thing that's really important. The ultimate lesson for you to take away from this book. When I first read this book, when I was halfway in the book, I was thinking, man, this is a good book. I can tell that Ellie Douglas is a very creative writer, a very creative person. She's a good writer. I can tell that. However, sadly, she didn't have her work edited. And we all make silly mistakes. I make mistakes. You all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It happens. And Ellie, she made mistakes too. And if she would have just gotten an editor, a line editor, to fix run-on sentences and silly things, and also to fix plot holes, this book would have been far better. But then I decided to look at the front of the book. And right there, it says, edited by Jill C. Corley. Ladies and gentlemen, the villain of this book is not the zombies. The villain of this book is not the haunted ghosts or the ghosts in the haunted asylum. The villain is not even the evil doctor. The villain of this book is Jill C. Corley. She's the villain. After I saw that, every page, all I could think of is, what the fuck? How? How? You understand? It's like the box with the different shapes, and you have to put them in. It's like a screen of circles, and errors are squares, and they can't fit through the circles. That screen of circles is an editor's filter. Mistakes are not supposed to get through that. Mistakes are squares. They're not supposed to fit through those circles. And yet this book is full of them. How? Why you do this, Jill? Ellie Douglas depended on you. Ellie Douglas probably paid you. What did she pay you for? Did you just upload this book to Grammarly? And like, oh, there's no underlined stuff, it must be good. There are so many silly things in here that an editor worth their pair of socks would be able to figure out and find and fix. From simple... This book has so many situations where there are words that should be apostrophe S or not apostrophe S. Sometimes there's the wrong word entirely. Sometimes you have just run-on sentences. Sometimes you have sentences that are not correct sentences. They're just like two-word sentences that are a continuation of the previous sentence. There's the section where there's four chapters that are left-centered. They're not full in the middle. Jill C. Corley. I don't know if you are a very selfish person and you don't care about your customers. Whether you do or don't, that's fine. That's your choice. But understand that these mistakes in this book, they don't look bad for Ellie Douglas. They look bad for you. Because so many mistakes in here that I've mentioned in this book are not this person's fault. We all make mistakes. She made them. That's fine. But she depended on you to point them out, to fix them. And yet they made it in this book. They shouldn't have. I'm genuinely mad at you. I'm mad at you on her part. If I spoke to you and I asked, hey Jill, you're an editor. What do you specialize in? Are you more of a line editor, or do you focus more on story plot and character development? I don't know how you would answer, but I know whichever one you pick, it's a lie because neither one of those were edited in this story, and it's a shame. I swear, I feel like that British cook guy with the blonde hair. Where are your standards? You're better than this, Jill. Bye.